some interesting and humorous introduction. Now that I've said that and undoubtedly captured your attention, my name is Noah Barfield. I'm a 17-year-old writer, and I'm here to talk to you about a main character in my action fantasy novel, Legendland. Now, the main character I'm here to talk to you about is named Scarlett. She is neither the protagonist nor the antagonist, but the person who falls somewhere in the middle. Scarlett is very fiery, stubborn, independent, somewhat short-sighted, combative, sarcastic, sardonic, curious, but generally doesn't trust people. She doesn't trust people because she has a special brand of amnesia where she forgets everything at the end of the day, so she doesn't really know who she's met before and thus is a little shaky on things like friendship. As if that weren't enough, she also has an annoying voice in the back of her head that tends to make all situations pretty awkward. So there is that. Now, Scarlett ends up making a deal with my main protagonist. But whenever I say deal, it's really a somewhat beneficial agreement. Now, my main protagonist says that, yes, I can probably eventually restore your memories to at least some form of clarity, but I can definitely make sure that you remember from this point on and don't forget things at the end of the day. Probably. Scarlett was cut out of the stomach of a wolf by my main protagonist. That's how she started the day, so she doesn't really think it can get much worse. She accepts my protagonist's deal, but little does she know that it's about to get at least a lot more interesting. Maybe not worse, but a lot more interesting. As soon as she does, she's whisked off to not the nearest town or inn to help get this journey of hers started, but to a witch's cabin to help my protagonist take care of some unfinished business. She then becomes sort of a student to my protagonist and must learn a thing or two. She is whisked all across Legendland in this unfamiliar world, and she learns that she can start to trust others, but she also learns that sometimes that trust is going to be misplaced. Now, Scarlett learns from my protagonist. She is able to take some of the traits of my main characters and adopt them for her own. In a world where she is human, where most are anything but, and she's not exactly best at social things like conversations and friendships, she has to take cues from people, and it's a learning experience. She has to learn to do what's necessary, which she's already willing to do, but she needs to figure out ways besides just punching people in the face to go about it. Though, it's a little conflicting for her because punching people in the face tends to get things done, actually, most of the time. So, there is still just a big learning curve for her in the world. Now, Scarlett does mature and become a more main character in her own right. In the beginning, she tends to be more supportive, but by the end, she has become a much more main character, plays much bigger roles, and has actually taught my main protagonist a thing or two. So, there's actually quite a deep bond between them that I will get into later whenever I talk about my main protagonist. Now, Scarlett does grow more mature by the end, but all of her traits pretty much still remain the same. Now, to show you a little bit of Scarlett's personality, I planned on reading a short snippet from Legendland, just a real short little piece, so that you can get a kind of an idea of what it's like. I'll do my best to distinguish not only between regular description and her and the others talking, but also that voice in her head. Luckily, in the section that I picked, her voice in her head doesn't really talk that much. I didn't pick this section just because of that, but it definitely was a contributing factor. Now, this is somewhere in the book whenever she's not super angry about something. So, as such, you're going to get to see a more mature side of her. Sort of a taste for things to come, in her character. She is much more of a hero's journey than most characters. So I hope this will display some progress on that element. Now, I'm not particularly the most adept at narrating because I'm an author. There should be other people for narrating, but I'll give it a shot and let's see what happens, shall we? I step in front of them all, my back to the double doors, and I clear my throat. We began this as separate individuals, fighting for the same cause. We came together as allies out of necessity. I tighten my grip on my bloody daggers, desperately trying to control my breathing. Give us speech to rally them. They need to believe we can win this. Can you really, though? But we will finish it as comrades, as friends in arms. We're not friends, Artemis says with a harsh bark of laughter. Maybe friend was too strong of a word to use. Perhaps not, I say, letting my gaze fall on each of theirs, hiding nothing. These could be our last moments in the world. I don't want to go out a liar. But we're more than just allies now. Maybe we're not friends, but we have a connection stronger than mere ties of necessity. Like it or not, we have bonded. We have to rely on each other. Our lives are dependent on one another. My life is in your hands. I sheath the dagger, placing my palm on the warm throne room doors. Once we go through these doors, there's no turning back. I put my life in your hands, and now I must ask you to do the same. You have to do what I tell you to do. We must trust each other, but this is not a democracy. Division will only get us killed. Silence follows my words, the distant sound of combat filling it quickly. Petrovin steps forward, putting his palm on the door next to mine, his face nearly touching me. I will put my life in your hands, he says, then grins, shrugging his shoulders. Hell, it's got to be better than putting it in my own, right? Benson steps up next, his large paw dwarfing ours, towering above us. His voice rumbles out from beneath his unarmored fur, muscles rippling with each word. I will stand by you all, no matter what may await us. He turns his heavy gaze to Artemis, who sighs and places her steel-clawed hand next to ours, at least until that witch is dead. I grin, despite myself, and she returns it, shaking her hair. At least until the witch is dead. Now, this showcases some of Scarlett's more mature personality and her becoming more of a hero and a leader in her own right. I look forward to maybe sharing Scarlett at the beginning of her journey, or maybe you'll just find that out for yourselves whenever you read this fantastic piece of literature that I have written. Whatever the case, I hope you enjoyed another snippet from Legendland, though I can't give too many away or else I'll just end up spoiling the story. So, please continue watching these videos, let everyone know about them, and let everyone know about Legendland, because it's awesome and deserves as much public attention as it can be given. So, thank you, and have a wonderful day. Continue to enjoy.